Hi, welcome back to Gender Studies, and we're looking at gendered media. Now, media pervades our everyday life in the form of the internet, television, movies, video games, music, advertising, magazine, news, programming, books, cell phones, and tablets, all kinds of ways of getting access to the media. Social media, for example, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, have all increased in popularity and make it easier to connect with others. 93% of teens use the internet, and most use it every day. Social media offers the opportunity for people to become producers, not just consumers of media. Now let's go in and see how and in what ways media influences our gendered selves and depicting desirable gender images, perspectives of gender in society, culture, and communication. So let's get beginning. Media saturation in cultural life. Well, people today are media saturated and media engaged, with as many as 98.9% of all households owning at least one TV. Now, films, newspapers, magazines, advertising, radio, and social media all fill our lives with media. Social media allows us to connect with others, to shop, to participate in online communities, and even produce media. So what kind of impact does media have? Well, although most people think that they are immune from media's influence, this is called the third person effect. And this is the belief that others are more affected by media than we are. I'm smarter than that, or I'm more capable. Well, no, we are all influenced by media. Research has found that media shapes our identities, our understandings, and opinions. Media influences how we perceive the roles of men, women, and the relationship in three important areas and ways. So the first way is what's called set the agenda. Now, the agenda setting theory, it suggests that the media tells us what is important. Now think about that. If you read a newspaper, all the things that are in the newspaper are the editorial board of the newspaper telling us what they want us to know. And every paper has a different media board which tells their newspaper writers what to write and what to write about. So media tells us what to think, but do they tell us what to think about? They don't tell us what to think, they also just tell us what to think about. The term gatekeeper, this is applied here. Remember, the gatekeeper is a person or group of people who control what messages get through to the consumer. Therefore, media, the editors, owners, and producers are examples of gatekeepers. The second issue is regulate images of women and men. Well, media acts as a gatekeeper, regulating the images of gender. Let's look at how they might do this. Well, one is the underrepresentation of women and minorities in media. Although women outnumber men in the population, they are not equally visible in the media, particularly of substantive characters. Women are rarely shown as authorities in news programming, and you'll see in the video that is in Journal 5. We're going to outlet where the journal video that's there is outlining the Bushdell test, and it's looking at gender bias in films. Minority group members are more likely to appear in supporting roles and more likely to be shown within their own racial culture and values obscured. When minority groups are represented, they usually are shown in a way that aligns with basic stereotypes. The portrayal of men stereotypically portrays men includes depictions of men as independent, strong, aggressive, and in charge. Traditionally, masculine men are praised and valued in media. So consider some of the media that you take in and sort of look at the media representations of men and women and what they see as masculine and feminine, and see if you agree with that, with a different lens on it now. White masculinity is shown as the standard for all men. Now, hip hop and rap music are a rare exception, but it tends to emphasize problematic stereotype of black men. More complex portrayals of men, for example, men who are also caring, are sometimes offered. Portraying women stereotypically, well, this includes portrayals of women included in depictions as females presented as shopping, grooming, being emotional, being focused on men, being sexual, and performing domestic activities. Whiteness is a standard and an ideal. Now, what I've noticed, at least, I do watch some TV, and what I have noticed is greater number of commercials that show women of color or other minority groups, or show mixed race couples. And that's a recent shift given the kind of dialogue that's gone on both in US and Canada over the last 3 or 4 years on issues of gender. Images of black women are often based on very negative stereotypes. Asian women and Latinas are often presented as exotic and sexualized. Women are frequently seen as sex objects. Even the more animated films show women with small waists and large breasts. Even as girls are sexualized, the media reinforces the notion that they alone are responsible for the consequences of sex. Women are usually seen as either good or bad. Bad women are witches, bitches, whores, and iron maidens. Sorry for the use of those words. They're not in my normal vocabulary. Good women are often pretty and passive, but this ideal has been challenged and has been expanded more recently. Women like the angels in Charlie's Angels, or Rose in the Titanic, and women on Sex and the City and Desperate Housewives. Now, these are older shows, but they were some of the first sort of demonstrations, but that women housewives, women could be progressive and strong. That was the case at first, but all of these women also have very traditional feminine characteristics and are dependent on men. If we move to, say, gendered images in advertising, we could look at the ads that show that these gendered portrayals of men and women. We are repeatedly exposed to the same messages. A majority of the ads feature visual images which are less subjective to conscious analysis than verbal claims. You know, for example, if you go through, I would encourage you to go to a store where you can see a bunch of magazines and look at magazines that are directed at men and magazines that are directed at women. It would give you some idea of media's influence on the images of men and women. We tend to think that we're immune to this advertising. Ads for men portray men in stereotypical ways and tend to link hyper-masculinity and violence. Men are seen as unable to do domestic tasks like clean and care for children. Men are seen as lazy and incompetent in the home. Even though women are seen as being successful in the home, male authority is still seen as, in the ads, through male voiceovers and male images like Mr. Clean. You have a male voiceover and you have a Mr. Clean cartoon, but you've got a woman doing the tasks. Why can't we have a woman doing the voiceovers? The objectification of women is often seen in ads. Women's sexuality is used to sell products. How many times have you seen car commercials with a woman standing beside it wearing only a bathing suit? Well, what's the significance of her bathing suit in a woman and a car? Why are they doing that? Well, they're doing it because it works. Many of these products are sold to women, are about their physical appearance. Now, advertising presents the foci of women's lives as physical appearance and pleasing others. Media does use techniques to push advertising to us. Now, for example, the use of what's known as complementary copy. Now, this would mean that articles that increase the appeal of a product and product placement. You've seen this before. You watch a movie and you see products that are placed in the movie that have their brands showing. The brand of the product that are mentioned in another form of media, it's like saying Coca-Cola in a book. You're using a brand, and that's brand placement. And immersive advertising. And this is where a product or a brand that is incorporated into an entire storyline. There were books, I think my daughter had them for a while, Prada in Gossip Girl books. All influences our relationships to products. If you watch TV, you'll have noticed some more examples of commercials that have, as I mentioned earlier, mixed race couples or people of color and depicted what were otherwise white men and women. Media is adjusting the depictions of men and women and non-binary gendered and women of color. Gender is fluid. And I think we start to see this because not only does media influence us, as I've mentioned, but we can influence media. So what we can move to is media motivates us to consume. That's one of the main functions of media, it seems, is to get us to consume. Some analysis argue that the primary function of media is to encourage us to buy things and buy services. Overly perfect bodies in the media can cause us to think that our own bodies are inadequate, but offers us products that purport to change our bodies and self-images. Media causes us to perceive normally functioning bodies as somehow unacceptable or maybe even defective, playing on our insecurities. So for example, steroid abuse is one consequence for men who want to improve their physique but want to meet the ones that are offered in the media, so that's one area. Normal changes in men's sexual vigor are shown as something to be cured with drugs. As men get older, their testosterone starts to drop, certainly starts dropping since they're beginning around 20 to 30 years old. There is a time when men's normal functioning may not be quite right. Well, rather than seeing it as normal, we need to take drugs in order to correct that. Women's body hair is represented as something to remove with products like razors and shaving creams. Again, it's generally accepted that that's what we do, and yet where did that come from? Plastic surgery is more and more common, and we have a long lasting effects of those who choose to undergo operations. So what about gender and social media? Does it play a role there? Well, our use of social media to communicate with others is closely related to gender issues. Let's touch on the social networking element. There are some gender differences in how men and women use social media. Men and boys tend to be more instrumental in their use of these media, using them to set up activities, for example. Men and boys also tend to use some social media such as for such things as games and virtual spaces more often than women do. Secondly, girls and women use phone conversations and textings as a way of nurturing a relationship. So some of the functions of social media and social networking. Well, social networking is one of the most popular uses of social media. Women and girls tend to use social networking as a resource for creating and maintaining relationships. Girls and women frequently use social networking for their self-development, talking about their experiences and thoughts, and incorporating others' reaction into those ideas into their own identities. Social networks can have a major downside in cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is communication via social network that is meant to hurt or humiliate another person. LGBTQ teens, girls who are less physically developed or perceived as less or more attractive than their peers, and boys, especially non-white boys, who are perceived as more feminine than their peers, are most likely to be cyberbullied. Cyberbullying has major consequences for its victims, ranging from trouble sleeping and anxiety to suicide. Cyberbullying is different than face-to-face bullying in that it can be done anonymously and that it has no boundaries, following the victim at all times. So, learning and sharing information. Well, the internet offers unparalleled sources of information about gender issues. Users can also find support and information related to specific issues. You'll find some of the examples in your text, and please have a look. Holding others accountable. Well, social media are frequently used to hold organizations and powerful interests accountable for sexism and gender violence. We could look at an area of activism, where activism is some of the social communities are frequently used for the purpose of activism. Organizations can use social media sites to get their message out about interest, to other interested parties. Social media allows activists to organize fast response to issues. Well, I can imagine, and I'm sure you can as well, there must be some consequences of gendered media, and we can, normalizing unrealistic standards like we've been seeing. When we are exposed to the unrealistic images of men and women in the media, we tend to see ourselves as inadequate. Media exposes us to flawed representations of relationships as well. Now, this can cause us to assess our own relationships unfairly. People can become dissatisfied with real and healthy relationships as a result of some of these images. If I see relationships that are much more aggressive or much more loving than the ones that I'm in, maybe I start to say, well, maybe those are the way things are supposed to be, and I'm wrong. I'm unhealthy. Pathologizing the body, the natural body, can be dangerous, and that's kind of what we find that media can be a participant in. The emphasis on thinness can lead to eating disorders, and men are increasingly affected by unrealistic body expectations as well. Now, this section we're moving into is, again, looking at, the area of media, and how does media normalize violence against women, or even does it? There is evidence that violence in the media can contribute to increasing violence in real life. The same research shows that when men watch sexually explicit films that degrade women, they become more dominant towards women around them. Another study shows that men who watch music videos and pro wrestling believe that forcing a partner to have sex is sometimes acceptable. No, it's not. When we see violence frequently in the media, we can come to see it as a normal part of life. Several theories of gender development show the relationship between media violence and real-life violence. One theory, social learning theory, would argue that when men and boys see images of men being rewarded for engaging in violence against women, they would more likely to behave that way themselves. Cognitive development theory would say that when women and girls see women in media inviting or allowing violence against them, they might think such violence is acceptable. Symbolic interactionalism, they would say that the social view of relationships represented in the media can affect how we see our own relationships. Now, media is becoming a bigger and bigger influence, certainly with the realm of social media, and certainly in the realm of the last 5 years, where the world has been going, where we've seen a pandemic, we see a political race in the US that has really upset some apple carts. We see war. All of this is having a big impact on media. And I know this has been a really quick overview of gendered media. So do your best. Next week and our last week will be a difficult chapter, and it's on gendered power and violence. All right? So I'll see you next week. Good luck and bye for now.